Hello, this is Lady Chatterley's Lover. Yes, the continuing story of Lady Chatterley's Lover with me, Morel Benard. Okay, a coal cart was coming downhill, clanking in the rain. Field started upwards past the big but wary-looking drapers in clothing shops, the post office, into the little marketplace of forlorn space where Sam Black was peering out of the door of the Sun, that called itself an inn, not a pub, and where the commercial travellers stayed and was bowing to Lady Chatterley's car. The church was away on the left among black trees. The car slid on downhill, past the Miners' Arms. It had already passed the Wellington, the Nelson, the 3 Tons, and the Sun. Now it passed the Miners' Arms, then the Mechanics' Hall, then the new and almost gaudy Miners' Welfare, and so past a few new villas out into the blackened road between dark hedges and dark green fields towards Stack's Gate. Tevershall. That was Tevershall. Merry England. Shakespeare's England. No, but the England of today, as Connie had realised since she had come to live in it. It was producing a new race of mankind, overconscious in the money and social and political side, on the spontaneous, intuitive side, dead, but dead. Half corpses, all of them, but with a terrible insistent consciousness in the other half. There was something uncanny and underground about it. It was an underworld and quite incalculable. How shall we understand the reactions in half-corpses? When Connie saw the great lorries full of steel workers from Sheffield, weird, distorted, smallish beings like men, off for an excursion to Matlock, her bowels fainted, and she thought, "Oh God, what has man done to man? What have the leaders of men been doing to their fellow men? They had reduced them to less than humanness. And now there can be no fellowship anymore. It is just a nightmare." She felt again in a wave of terror the grey, gritty hopelessness of it all. With such creatures for the industrial masses and the upper classes as she knew them, there was no hope anymore. Yet she was wanting a baby, and an heir to Rugby, an heir to Rugby. She shuddered with dread. Yet Mellors had come out of all of this, yes, but he was as apart from it all as she was. Even in him there was no fellowship left. It was dead. The fellowship was dead. There was only apartness and hopelessness as far as this was concerned. And this was England, the vast bulk of England, as Connie knew, since she had motored from the centre of it. The car was rising towards Stack's Gate. The rain was holding off, and in the air came a queer, pellucid gleam of May. The country rolled away in long undulations south towards the peak, east towards Mansfield and Nottingham. Connie was travelling south. As she rose onto the high country, she could see on her left on a height above the rolling land the shadowy, powerful bulk of Warsop Castle, dark grey, with below it the reddish plastering of miners' dwellings, newish, and below those the plumes of dark smoke and white steam from the grey colliery, which put so many £1,000 per annum into the pockets of the Duke and the other shareholders. The powerful old castle was a ruin, yet it hung its bulk onto the low skyline over the black plumes and the white that waved on the damp air below. A turn, and they ran on the high-level Stacks Gate. Stacks Gate, as seen from the high road, was just a huge and gorgeous new hotel. The Conisbee Arms, standing red and white and gilt in barbarous isolation off the road. But if you looked, you saw on the left rows of handsome modern dwellings, set down like a game of dominoes with spaces and gardens, a queer game of dominoes that some weird masters were playing on the surprised earth. And beyond these blocks of dwellings at the back rose all the astonishing and frightening overhead erections of a really modern mine, chemical works and long galleries, enormous and of shapes not before known to man. The headstock and pit bank of the mine itself were insignificant among the huge new installations. And in front of this, the game of dominoes stood forever in a sort of surprise, waiting to be played. This was Stacks Gate, new on the face of the earth since the war. But as a matter of fact, though even Connie did not know it, downhill, half a mile below the hotel, was old Stacks Gate, with a little old colliery, and blackish old brick dwellings, and a chapel or two, and a shop or two, and a little pub or two. But that didn't count anymore. The vast plumes of smoke and vapour rose from the new works up above, and this was now Stacks Gate. No chapels, no pubs, even no shops. Only the great works, which are the modern Olympia, with temples to all the gods, then the model dwellings, then the hotel. The hotel, in actuality, was nothing but a miner's pub, though it looked first-classy. Even since Connie's arrival at Rugby, this new place had arisen on the face of the earth, and the model dwellings had filled with riff-raff, drifting in from anywhere to poach Clifford's rabbits, among other occupations. The car ran on along the uplands, seeing the rolling county spread out. The county. It had once been a proud and lordly county. In front, looming again and hanging on the brow of the skyline, was the huge and splendid bulk of Chadwick Hall, more window than wall. One of the most famous Elizabethan houses. Noble, it stood alone above a great park, but out of date, passed over. It was still kept up, but as a showplace. Look, how our ancestors lauded it. That was the past. The present lay below. God alone knows where the future lies. The car was already turning between little old blackened miners' cottages to descend to Youthwaite. And Youthwaite, on a damp day, was sending up a whole array of smoke, plumes and steam to whatever gods there be. Youthwaite, down in the valley, with all the steel threads of the railways to Sheffield drawn through it, and the coal mines and the steel works sending up smoke and glare from long tubes, and the pathetic little corkscrew spire of the church that is going to tumble down. Still, pricking the fumes always affected Connie strangely. It was an old market town, centre of the Dales. One of the chief inns was the Chatterley Arms, there in Youthwaite. Rugby was known as Rugby, as if it were a whole place, not just a house, as it was to outsiders. Rugby Hall, near Tevershall. Rugby, a seat. The miners' cottages, blackened, stood flush on the pavement with that intimacy and smallness of colliers' dwellings over 100 years old. They lined all the way. The road had become a street, and as you sank, you forgot instantly the open, rolling country where the castles and big houses still dominated, but like ghosts. Now you were just above the tangle of naked railway lines, and foundries and other works rose above you. So big, you were only aware of walls. And iron clanked with a huge reverberating clank, and huge lorries shook the earth, and whistles screamed. Yet again, once you had got right down and into the twisted and crooked heart of the town behind the church, you were in the world of 2 centuries ago, in the crooked streets where the Chatterley Arms stood and the old pharmacy, streets which used to lead out to the wild open world of the castles and stately cushioned houses. But at the corner, a policeman held up his hand as 3 lorries loaded with iron rolled past, shaking the poor old church. And not till the lorries were past could he salute her ladyship. So it was. Upon the old crooked Burgess streets, hordes of oldish blackened miners' dwellings crowded, lining the roads out. And immediately after these came the newer, pinker rows of rather larger houses, plastering the valley, the homes of more modern workmen. And beyond that, again, in the wide rolling regions of the castles, smoke waved against steam, and patch after patch of raw reddish brick showed the newer mining settlements, sometimes in the hollows, sometimes gruesomely ugly along the skyline of the slopes. And in between, were the tattered remnants of the old coaching and cottage England, even the England of Robin Hood, where the miners prowled with the dismalness of suppressed sporting instincts when they were not at work. England, my England, but which is my England? The stately homes of England made good photographs and create the illusion of a connection with the Elizabethans. My handsome old halls are there from the days of good Queen Anne and Tom Jones, but smuts fall and blacken on the drab stucco that has long ceased to be golden, and one by one, like the stately homes they were, abandoned. Now they are being pulled down. As for the cottages of England, there they are, great plasterings of brick dwellings on the hopeless countryside. Now they are pulling down the stately homes. The Georgian halls are going. Fritchley, a perfect old Georgian mansion, was even now, as Connie passed it in the car, being demolished. It was in perfect repair till the war in the Weathersleys had lived in style there. But now it was too big, too expensive, and the country had become too uncongenial. The gentry were departing to pleasanter places where they could spend their money without having to see how it was made. This is history. One England blots out another. The mines had made the halls wealthy. Now they were blotting them out as they had already blotted out the cottages. The industrial England blots out the agricultural England. One meaning blots out another. The new England blots out the old England. And the continuity is not organic but mechanical. Connie, belonging to the leisured classes, had clung to the remnants of the old England. It had taken her years to realize that it was really blotted out by this terrifying new and gruesome England, and that the blotting out would go on till it was complete. Fritchley was gone. Eastward was gone. Shipley was going. Squire Winter's beloved Shipley. Connie called for a moment at Shipley. The park gates at the back opened just near the level crossing of the colliery railway. The Shipley colliery itself stood just beyond the trees. The gate stood open because through the park was a right-of-way that the colliers used. They hung around the park. The car passed the ornamental ponds in which the colliers threw their newspapers and took the private drive to the house. It stood above a side, a very pleasant stucco building from the middle of the 18th century. It had a beautiful alley of yew trees that had approached an old house, and the hall stood serenely spread out, winking its Georgian panes as if cheerfully. Behind, there were really beautiful gardens. Connie liked the interior much better than Rugby. It was much lighter, more alive, shapen and elegant. The rooms were panelled with creamy painted panelling. The ceilings were touched with gilt, and everything was kept in exquisite order. All the appointments were perfect, regardless of expense. Even the corridors managed to be ample and lovely, softly curved and full of life. But Leslie Winter was alone. He had adored his house, but his park was bordered by 3 of his own colliers. He had been a generous man in his ideas. He had almost welcomed the colliers in his park. Had the miners not made him rich? So, when he saw the gangs of unshapely men lounging by his ornamental waters, not in the private part of the park, no, he drew the line there, he would say. The miners are perhaps not so ornamental as deer, but they are far more profitable. But that was the golden, momentarily latter half of Queen Victoria's reign. Miners were then good working men. Winter had made the speech half apologetic to his guest, the then Prince of Wales. And the Prince had replied in his rather guttural English, "You are quite right. If there were coal under Sandringham, I would open a mine on the lawns and think it first-rate landscape gardening. Oh, I'm quite willing to exchange roe deer for colliers at the price. Your men are good men too, I hear." But then the Prince had perhaps an exaggerated idea of the beauty of money and the blessings of industrialism. However, the Prince had been a king, and the king had died, and now there was another king whose chief function seemed to be to open soup kitchens. And the good working men were somehow hemming Shipley in. New mining villages crowded on the park, and the squire felt somehow that the population was alien. He used to feel in a good-natured but quite grand way lord of his own domain and of his own colliers. Now, by a subtle privation of the new spirit, he had somehow been pushed out. It was he who did not belong any more. There was no mistaking it. The mines, the industry, had a will of its own, and this will was against the gentleman owner. All the colliers took part in the will, and it was hard to live up against it. It either shoved you out of the place or out of life altogether. You are listening to Lady Chatterley's Lover. Yes, taking us through the life, the grandeur of the environment, Lady Chatterley's Lover. Join me for the next video. Please join me for the next video. Listen to the next video of Lady Chatterley's Lover. Okay, I'll see you then, Morel saying for now.